Hi, welcome to Write More Light. This is Sarah from the Midwest Writing Center. Excited to talk to you today with one of my favorite people, who I'll introduce to you in a moment. For folks who are not accustomed to watching this series, we will either have little tiny writing lessons, or we will have lovely interviews with awesome people. Today, we're doing an interview. Following the interview, I'll give you updates on the Midwest Writing Center that will be contemporary to the time when I make this video. And then we'll have a free write. Usually the free write has to do with the topic at hand. Sometimes it doesn't. Today it will. Thank you for hanging out with us today, Director of the Midwest Writing Center and excellent poet and musician Ryan Collins.
Hi.
Hey.
Sure.
So today, I asked you to join me because you're both a musician and a writer,
Mhm.
and a fun person to talk to if I'm allowed to say so. Uh,
You can
because I
you can
want
say
to
whatever you want.
because I want to talk about music. I personally think that pretty much all art has its intersections, right? I think that art is art is art is art. And a lot of the time when we talk about arts, when we talk about the art scene, when we talk about whatever, when we use the word art, people have one specific thing in mind. I tend to use the word art interchangeably with whatever genre I'm talking about. And I think that is relatively unique. So my first question, gonna just start, we're just gonna hit the road running, hit the ground running, is what are the intersections for you as a creator? Like where do you find the different places when you're like, it's time to make music versus it's time to write? How does it feel in your body, in your brain?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't write songs per se. So I play drums, mostly drums, percussion, anything in that sort of space. So like mostly when, I'm either playing with other people who are trying to write songs or doing most of the songwriting load. So that's different than writing poems, which is just me trying to write poems, usually with no help other than whatever reading or whatever I've been doing, right? Whatever's sort of like around me. um so in that way it's different. I mean, like, I've done collaborative writing, but it's different. I played drums first. I've been playing drums like almost my entire life. Like my one of my family's really good friends has a story about giving me my first drum when I was 3, and my dad was really like, I will get you for this. My mom still has that drum. It's like a centerpiece now. It's very adorable. Um, but so like I've been doing that my whole life, like before I ever thought about writing. So my connection to that is a lot, in some ways, a lot deeper, I think. And that really informs my writing. It took a while of me writing poems on a regular basis to kind of get a sense of like, oh, this is how, other than like the obvious, like, oh, song lyrics can be poems too, which is maybe something, we'll get to, or we can talk about. And like when I was a kid, I was really into, that was like the golden age of hip hop. And so listening to all these amazing beats, many of which were sampled from equally, if not more amazing recordings, and then these amazing lyrics, right? And that was sort of my first putting those two things together. And I never really wrote, like, I've tried to write lyrics for a couple bands I've been in and stuff. It's not, it's like, oh, he writes poems, he can write song lyrics. It's never gone well. But just the playing and the feel for music, it might sound a little corny, but like it's like a real spiritual thing for me. They're both very embodied processes. And so I mean, the drums, I'm fortunate that I now live in a place where I can play for real every day. And so that's like my meditation and my exercise kind of all put together. Um, but to me, like, to what you were saying, art is art is art. Like, on some level, I once heard a poet, pretty great American poet, say that, all poems are a form of prayer, and I think all songs are a form of prayer. Like, I agree with him, but I would go even further. And so on some level, it's kind of all, it's mind, body, and spirit for me, like all the above, both of them. I guess they just work in really different ways because I mean, right now I'm not playing with anybody, so they're both very individual, but I'm not like composing on a drum kit the same way that I am like when I'm trying to write poems. And it's the poems still have more of the thinky stuff going on. Playing drums is a lot more just the opposite, I guess. There's a long answer. I'm sorry.
No, it was a super weird question, which is, a little intentional because I'm not a musician. Oh dang, I thought there was a guitar behind me, but there's not. I wanted it to be funny.
Pop
Um,
guitar.
yeah,
I too,
basically.
I too am music.
And so I don't really have any familiarity with other form, like I have never put my hands on other forms of art in any significant way. And so that was an important question for me to ask as someone who's not in it. Um, but I did
Oh,
assume that it was complicated and sort of weird.
yeah, I mean, like I haven't done too much either. Like I don't have like a lot of visual art capacity, or I don't think I do. I haven't. But there was a time where kind of before everybody had cameras on their phones, which dates me as being quite old. Um, there were like a few musicians that I was friends with. We started doing like these photography collages. So we would just kind of take pictures and then arranging them, and not just sort of the juxtaposition of images, but also the shapes. And that was right around the time I started to get serious about writing, and like thinking about like trying to put that out there and maybe study and really kind of dedicate myself to it, as opposed to just writing in journals and writing poems on sort of like a passing, um albeit very interested way. But all of those things, like the thing that's coming to my mind as we're talking is like the physicality of it. Like the fun of that was getting the images back, because we would take them to Walgreens or whatever and get them developed. We weren't super cool doing our own photo
That's
processing
a
or
very
anything like that.
expensive thing to do.
I mean,
Set up a dark room.
now, yeah, it probably is. I don't know. I mean, I know I have friends who work in that space and who I've worked with, like in terms of them creating images and me creating words. But it's like I don't know. Like I think for a lot of people, writing sounds like it's like like a thinky thing, but it's like it's a very physical process, I think. And most writers that I've had the opportunity to speak with about this, I hear that a lot and expressed in different ways. And so I think it's got a, especially with like the stuff I've been trying to write recently, I've been trying to do less of the thinky and more just kind of feel. And so much of not that there's not a very disciplined intellectual side to music, obviously, but there is. But I don't read a lot of charts necessarily. Like I'm not necessarily doing that kind of thing, other than like doing my rudiments for warm-ups and stuff like that, which I don't really have a comp for that with poetry now that I think about it. Like how do you warm up to write a poem? I don't know. I mean, there are ways, like free writes and keeping lists and whatever, but I don't really necessarily do a lot of that like in a purposeful sort of way.
It's interesting. You said a couple of, like I took notes while you were talking. The idea that our bodies and our brains are separate is something that I think it's everybody sort of has this idea in their mind. And I think it's sort of a problem. I mean, in life,
Yeah.
but in writing in particular, our bodies evolved to hold something on something, right? Writing is writing from tablet into pen and paper. And we're not yet used to the computer physiologically, but also if we can't, like if it weren't that way, right? If our bodies weren't involved, we would see more people, and not that people don't do this, but we would see more people writing by dictation, for example.
Yeah.
And I know the two of us write by hand, but I think that probably not the majority of people do. I don't know. Maybe it's 50-50. I just don't feel like it's
I don't have a sense of it anymore. There's so many ways, but I do use dictation. I'm not always great about going back and transcribing my dictation, but like I do use it a lot because it's just a
really,
lot. It's faster and it's embodied, here we are again. It's like that actually, like,
it's another
saying
physical
something,
thing that
putting
you're
out in the
doing.
ear. Well, and you're using your ear, like not just your inner ear, like how this sounds, but like you know, most poets, I mean, probably most writers I know, but certainly most poets I know, you know, they read their work out loud, you know, when they're editing, right? For the music of it and for, you know, everything else. But um yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I want
Yeah,
to, this is,
yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
pretty sure I'm unique in this way, but it's another way that like my body is very much involved in my writing. Um, I used to kind of think there was something wrong with me, but it only happens when I write. I get cold when I write.
Hmm.
Like um, I don't know that I get goosebumps, and I don't want to say that I do because it sounds goofy. But I get very cold. Like even if I'm outside on a hot day, I get cold when I write, and I think that's, I don't know, interesting anyway.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean the whole like the mind body, I think you're right. Like I mean you know, my partner and I like to joke that a lot of times we just feel like you know, our bodies are just vehicles to carry our heads around from room to room. Which is not an original joke, but you know. And it does feel that way a lot. But especially when I'm playing drums, that kind of goes away. And I think when you're I think the comparable space is when you're writing some, or for me anyway, like when the writing's going well and you're kind of in that flow state or whatever
Writing
people want
itself
to
or
call it.
whatever.
Yeah. It's, you know, you feel like you're kind of just getting out of the way of the work. I feel like and it's probably just from a lot more training for a lot longer, and doing it throughout my whole life from being a little kid. But I feel like I can kind of get to that space. That space is a very accessible to
Faster.
me when I'm playing drums. I can kind of just go there. Writing, it's a little more hard to summon. But the other thing I think that's interesting, so like a long time ago, the Writing Center was fortunate to host Jory Graham for a couple events, and I remember her saying something, and this would have been like the early 2000s, right? So this is like before, excuse me, tablets and smartphones, and you know, like all, you know, that stuff's not around. People are just, you know, this is like probably right before online journals started to get respect as like a legitimate thing. But she was saying that like the nerves in our fingers are connected to the parts of the brain that are associated with compassion. Right. So when we use a typewriter or something that's like
Really
bang, bang,
tactile.
bang, bang,
Yeah.
or you know, to my mind, the first thing I thought of when I heard that was playing music, like a piano, drums, something like that, something that's got a lot of resistance and like requires a lot of touch and finesse, but also a lot of like pressure and strength. Um, and so when we do that a lot, we're exercising that part of the, we're firing that part of the brain. And so the more we use haptic keyboards and these things that have like zero response and zero pushback, it's easier to use and it might be more ergonomic, but it's also maybe not requiring us to like be as forceful maybe. And just she was saying this like in, you know, like what does that mean in terms of, you know, the process itself and how much compassion we may or may not be accessing while we're doing it. And that's always stuck with me. I think that's interesting.
I'm writing that down.
um I mean, obviously she's not a neuroscientist, so I don't, you know, please folks at home fact check
Mhm.
all this, but I do believe there is something to that, right? And like the work connects those things, I think, even when we feel like, oh, I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing, it's just out there. um you're just you're it's presence. I don't know, we're gonna get into some real like new agey probably sounding stuff pretty fast with this, but I also think it's a useful vocabulary for talking about this stuff because at least for me in my experience it feels
It's hard to talk about art
pretty
without
true.
sounding like you're into witchcraft, which, maybe we are.
I mean, that's the etymology of spell, right? Like, you know, the spell is not, has nothing to do with winning a spelling bee. It has to do with like conjuring, right? So like, you know, when you think about it in those terms, like, yeah, with it, that is what we're dealing like. What's Alexander Chee saying, that really awesome essay, How to Become an American
Mm-hmm.
Writer. Yeah, you know, books were as they always had been, the only magic, something like that. I
I
feel
would,
the same. I feel the same way about, music just I don't feel as led to a place, I guess, when I'm reading. I guess now we're talking about being like receiving the work more than creating it. Um, but yeah, I don't know, like it just can and I mean like they feed each other, right? But especially like I do like to listen to music when I'm writing. But I've gotten sort of particular about what
Yeah,
kind of music. I can't do
curating that.
I can't do lyrics. I can't do lyrics because I don't know, they just bore into my word part of my brain and they just start popping up on the screen like predictive text. So
For
that's
sure.
kind of
For sure.
that's terrible. We don't want that.
I want
Or
to
I don't want that. Maybe some people that is useful, but
cite our source because this was just sitting here and I knew it was underlined.
oh, dope.
Ryan just referenced On Becoming an American Writer, which is an essay by Alexander Chee. It is the last essay in the book, How to Write an Autobiographical Novel. He says there's a long, beautiful paragraph that leads to books were still to me as they had been when I found them, the only magic.
There it is. Thank you. I knew
That's just really
I
poignant.
was
I referenced it in the
poorly
last
paraphrasing that. Yeah, there you go.
referenced it in the last right more late.
It's an incredible book. You should go and read it independent of anything that we're talking about.
Uh I didn't mean to like get you off where you were going. I just didn't want to lose that one either.
Oh no, no, that's fine. Yeah, I
But
just go ahead.
well, I was thinking too about the physicality in art. Like we definitely nobody's going to tell an actor like their body is not involved in their work. No, nobody's going to say that to a visual artist either. I that's the first thing that came to mind. My sister's a visual artist. Historically, she's been a painter, but she doesn't turn her hands away from anything. Um, and even painting, which you think I think when I imagine someone painting, I see them standing up with an easel in front of them, right? Maybe sitting on a stool. But she like gets into these weird monkey positions and her hands are in the paint. And I don't think that's rare. I don't think the painter in our mind with like a curly mustache and a delicate brush is I don't know why he's got a curly mustache. Does my sister? No. Uh, I don't think that she's atypical in that way. Like you have to get into the project in order to create the project. So I'm trying to think like, is there an art I can think of that doesn't involve the body? Um, you certainly wouldn't say that to a singer, right? We've talked about music, but you certainly wouldn't say it to a singer. Um, even like I'm like looking around the room, right? Definitely not a sculptor or a potter. Um,
I mean, I just don't think there is such a thing because, at the very least, the body is the mind's tool
mhm.
to, render whatever it's going to render out in the physical world. And so without it, we're the Simpsons, right? We're just brains and, or is that Futurama? It's Futurama, right? Brains in jar, like the heads in the
Oh yeah,
jars,
yeah.
that stuff. Yeah,
I was thinking
that's
of the
fucking,
aliens on The Simpsons, but you're talking about the heads in the jar.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's, yep, that's my bad.
Same
I
art,
haven't kept
you know?
up. Yeah, 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 yeah. But I don't think that's a thing. Maybe some degree to another. But I'm thinking like, when you're talking about painting, like, yeah, I've seen writers that I know. Like some people have their rituals and they got to be in their space and whatever, and that's cool. But like also, I see writers, write everywhere and on cocktail napkins. And how many writers do you know that usually it's early in the day, so I don't have any ink on my hands yet, but I will. I will have blue ink on my hand. No, this hand because I'm right-handed. But probably both actually, depending on what I'm doing. Which is like maybe that doesn't necessarily mean much, but like I have gone back to writing by hand more. I mean I use everything. I don't want to sound like I'm like, you got to
You
write
have
your
a notes
drafts by
app for a
hand,
reason.
dude. You got to be analog, dude. I mean, well, whatever works. Like um the point is to be able to capture something in the moment that you're trying to capture it. And if what you have is your notes app, then that's awesome. If what you have is a small notebook, that's awesome. What you have is like a placemat and a pencil, then awesome.
Oh yeah, no
And I'm not I'm reluctant to privilege those things. And like on some level, I think,
accessibility is the point.
yeah, well, and like that translates to music too. It's not always about like having like the sexy gear or like, yeah, I mean,
Nobody
as
else
time
would see
goes
me
on,
do
I
that.
get more and more interested to see, particularly with like drums and percussion, people using things that are not, or using elements that are not necessarily like actual instruments.
Traditional.
In terms of like, or like if you like setting up like a drill, so it's gonna like strike a particular instrument like at a particular interval, like regularly, and you can kind of build on that, like stuff like that. I think is really interesting. And like, but you still, you got to have the idea and then you have to physically make it happen. Um, and like, yeah, I don't know, the listening to music and writing thing, I think I don't always do it, but I like to do it a lot, but it does have to be instrumental for me. Um,
Very rarely will I like, I'll have like a specific like sensory need and I can't listen to music. Um, but yeah, that is
yeah,
that's
if
a
you're like out in the world, like if you're sort of like, field notes kind of
yeah.
something like that, where you need to really be present in the environment, like then yeah, obviously it's not. I took when I was in graduate school, I took a class with a really awesome poet named Tony Trujillo. And I would always, Chicago's a walking public transit town. And so I went everywhere with my headphones on and everything was like sort of soundtracked, right? In that wonderful way that headphones allow us to sort of be in the world in our own little movies. Um, but he was like one of the first people is like, like you're missing a lot, right? You're missing a lot. And not just in terms of like safety, but just like sitting and being present. It was a meditations and poetics class. And so like talking about like walking meditations and like, you're still moving through the world, but you're like really trying to take that in. And like I think that's also helpful for like listening to music. It's like deep listening. I don't know if people know what that is, and I'm probably not a good person to go deep on it. Um, but yeah, just that, the both of those things cultivate attention, and sort of, I think, demand presence. Um, and I think those are good practices in general for people to have in their lives. And the fact that these two things, at least for me and a lot of people, um, inform each other so wonderfully
Um,
is, yeah,
that
great.
was
Keeps me grounded.
that was beautiful, and I want to talk about that now. But I'm not going to. I took notes. Um, I think there's a couple of different camps about listening to music. Let's assume that we're on board with listening to music. Before I say any more. When you create your art, we're talking about writing specifically. I just I do always say art, but this is really a focused one. Um, you see, and we talked about this a little bit, not on camera, but in general, that we see like a lot of writers will show their playlists or whatever, what they're listening to or what they had on repeat when they were working on a project.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that there's a camp where that's sort of an after, where you're like, I realized this is what I was always doing when I was in this space. And then there are folks who maybe, and this is something that I've been noticing about myself, so that's why it's in my mind. Um, I will put on specific albums or artists to get myself in the space for a
Yeah.
specific project. And then more often, this is like that's a specific project or two. Um, More often, I will put on something that is very unfamiliar to me so that it doesn't, like you were saying, so it doesn't take over. I don't mind if it has lyrics if I don't know them. If I know
Yeah,
the lyrics, it's over.
I
Um,
get that.
so how do you work? And what do you think? Like I'm asking you, you're the expert in the room. Maybe you're not an expert in the world. Uh I love that
I'm
term,
the expert
expert in the
between
room.
two of us.
Um, but like what sort of differences you see in those, like in the art that's being made, maybe?
I mean, yeah, like I dig what you're saying about
The question I wrote down was a lot more clear than how I said it.
it's don't worry about it. It's fine. Um the like what you were saying about like like you've got music that you're familiar with that you like, when I listen to this thing, I go to this place or I associate this music. Like music's great for cultivating the associative intelligence, right? And the associate, and like we do that all the time. We make associations all the time. Mostly, I think we do it unconsciously or subconsciously or whatever. It's like a muscle to me. Like the more that you use that, the more that you're aware of that you're making these connections between different things and experiences and sensory experiences. That's gold, I think, for any creative work. I think that's where a lot of like personal style maybe comes from. Because no one's going to make the same associations that you are, right? So like if you having like that bank of things, like the first album that comes to mind is Elliott Smith's XO.
Mhm.
I know people usually go to the earlier work a little bit more, and that's like, you know, your Pitchfork Perfect Tens, but like that record is just, and I just mean for me, when that record came out, what I was doing, where I was sort of at in my life, all that kind of stuff, like it's hard for me to listen to that record and not go to kind of a certain place
Yes.
and have
Yeah.
sort of a certain vibe. So if I was sort of interested in trying to get into that space, I know I've got, you know, like you said, art is art is art. I've got, you know, paintings and books and movies, lots of movies. I worked at a movie store for a long time, so like, you know, I'm very much a cinephile. So like I've got all that stuff and I've got those reference points. And I don't know, sometimes like listening to new, like putting on like a playlist on like one of those like the YouTube, like, you know, chill, whatever, those kind of things, like as like background. That's fine. That's not usually what I usually like am listening to music that I have and that I'm familiar with. It's just mostly instrumental. I don't usually like, if I'm listening to something that I haven't heard before that I'm excited about, I'm probably not going to be putting that on while I'm trying to write,
Yeah, because
because
then
I'm
you're
more like,
listening.
yeah, exactly. That's probably something I'm going to put in my car and go for a drive.
It's you know, I hadn't thought of this with instrumental music, but like, and this is gonna, I don't know, maybe this won't surprise you at all. But I feel like it's gonna sound pretty random. But like, if you put on Blue Train, like John Coltrane, I will sing along to the thing. I will not be writing.
Oh, I get, yeah. I mean, you
There's
know,
no
like
words, but
that's your association, right? Like that's how you interact with it. So I think
yeah, it's just
being
too well known to
oh
me.
yeah, no, I get that's what, yeah, the familiarity. Sometimes it might be, for me, it's kind of any lyrics, because even if I'm not, it's worse if I'm familiar with them, right? Because then they don't have to, you know, then it's not boring into my head. It lives there rent free, and so it's just waking up. Um,
Oh, I mean, I'm singing
as
along to
opposed
it.
to just like having competing language in them. For some reason, having the TV on or something doesn't bother me, but music has a way of like worming its way into like
That's
writing if I'm trying to write. But like I don't necessarily do it for a mood. I do it to sort of like clear space.
at a set of space. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like so I'm listening to music that I know and that I appreciate, but is usually sort of like opening things up. It doesn't I listen to a lot of like I listen to a lot of music on this one particular record label. I'll just shout out International Anthem. If people aren't familiar, you should definitely run, don't
International
walk.
anthem.
Yeah, they
I'll put that in the notes.
lots of like great improvisers. Micaiah McCraven is on that label. That's a name people would probably know. Oh man, the guy that produced Andre 3000's new record, um, Carlos Nino, is on that record. Jeff Parker of Tortoise and a bunch of other awesome things is on that label. They just do amazing stuff. And so I kind of know like whatever they're going to do, however disparate it is, it's going to be something I'm going to dig, and it's going to be kind of atmospheric, and have a certain complexity, but also, and it's not all instrumental. I don't want to paint it like that, but I'm just trying to kind of get into a space where whatever I'm trying to write and whatever can happen, and you know, trying to not think about other things. And music just has a way of kind of putting me, it's not compartmentalization, it just sort of like puts everything in the back seat, and we can kind of focus on what we're trying to do right now. And so that's just part of like music's power for me. And I find that incredibly useful, but I don't always necessarily do it, because yeah, sometimes just the listening to the world is, I think,
I'm
also
gonna
incredibly
say,
important.
and I should have said this when I introduced you, that the reason I I believe you are particularly useful to this topic is because you just have no genre allegiance, really. Like you're gonna you're going to recommend me something from anywhere that I just don't know yet. And I can't say like what it's going to be. So I want to be clear, like, um, you're all over the place with what
Yeah,
you're.
my recommendations today might not be, but yes,
Yeah,
very
well, we've
that.
got something in mind.
I'm non-denominational. Yeah, it's all good. I hate talking to people about music, like, oh, I listen to everything, but, and like once it gets to the but, I just kind of
Like, but
I start to lose interest fast because it's like, well, but the first thing you said. Anyway, but the other thing I think, like, so like in terms of like prompts, and like I want to write something, but I don't know what to write, or like I don't, like I don't know, I'm not in a particular mood, I'm not like working on this particular project, but I feel like writing, like that sort of ekphrasis I find really useful. That I will do too, like when I just like I'm not working on a project, or it's not like some kind of specific idea, but I just gonna I want to write for 10 minutes and just see where it goes. And then like, yeah, just put it like, I think that's useful for people who have that feeling, and then like listen to something that you don't know. Right. So you don't know what to expect. Like go try something new and then just see how you feel and just follow that with words and see what happens. I think that can lead to a lot of interesting stuff because you're already sort of defamiliarizing yourself by listening to music that you haven't listened to, which for a lot of people is really hard. People don't do that. And if there's one thing I would encourage people to do, it's to do, like read variously, listen variously. Don't just get stuck listening to what you're listening to in high school. Like
Mhm. No,
music, music kept going. If that's one of you, I'm talking to those people now. If that's you, music has continued, and there's a lot of awesome going out there. So
I
don't
have
don't
thoughts
miss out.
about that. That like when we are young, and we when we are still exploring music, it's it's something that's allowed of us, and it's something that's expected of us. I'm talking about like when you're in high school and you're always discovering new music. And also, it's a time when we're allowed to be emotional. Um, I think
Well,
that
go
when
ahead.
we
I'm sorry.
as we age, we like let other things take up our time, that sort of hide the emotional bit of that, and so we go back to what we're comfortable with. I think about this a lot.
It's that's literally part of it. It's it's what we were just talking about. Like the associations that people have with music. Like, you listen to a song and it's like, that was the summer I always want to remember. And so the music of that
Mhm.
summer then becomes like the music that you associate with like really good times. And so for a lot of people, that stuff sort of calcifies and gets fixed. And they just don't go any further. And I guess like one of the things that's you know playing music and trying to write poems and stuff helps, is like I'm always hungry for new stuff, like, and not just out of like, oh, I need to keep up in a professional way and know what's going on in the community, but like, I really love this stuff, and I'm really really curious about it, and I'm never gonna get tired. Like I never tire of new music. I just got 2 new records last week, and I'm kind of giddy about it. I'm like naughty. It's very excited. So like, and that just goes on, and and that process, it's like any other education where you never reach the end of it. It's always ongoing, it's always expanding. And I think that's exciting too, because then you never get to the end of it. You can't really be a completist. um yeah.
I think that's a good note that anytime you're engaged with art, it's never going to end is important. I mean, there are barriers to entry with some kinds of art, obviously, just like supplies and whatever, um, but not so much listening and not so much writing.
Yeah, and I mean the time thing is real and too, but a lot of it is people just get locked into like these associations, and they don't develop them for, they don't really realize that they're necessarily, that's why they like this music so much. They kind of do in like this kind of generalized way and like in a timeline sort of sense, but they don't get that like what it really is it's really tied to like deep emotions, right? And like hopefully we're still having those deep emotions as we get older, because I think that's part of being a healthy human being. I think part of a way to access that stuff and explore that stuff it is listening and, you know, or reading or viewing or whatever it is. You don't necessarily have to try to be making it. I think that's takes it to a whole other level and can be a lot more rewarding, and it makes the listening, viewing audience aspect of it all the more rich.
So there are a handful of people in the world who just don't engage with music. Um, and then there are the people we're talking about who are sort of stuck in their favorites, right? They've got their own greatest hits. Um, what sort of, I mean, other than like just try the thing, what sort of advice might you have for somebody who's interested in sort of engaging in either an ekphrastic or like mood making or space making exercise with music, if they're one of those people?
I mean, if you're just trying to find something that's like unfamiliar, like, you know, I just want to write something that's like new and fresh, and, you know, I don't know what it is, what I want to write, but I feel like writing or making something or painting something or whatever, because this would apply in all aspects.
Mhm.
Um, Places where I go to find, and like, you know, again, I'm a musician. I'm always I have a very voracious appetite for new music and stuff. Ask friends, you know, just be social. If you know people who are into music, like get Rex, like hopefully, you know, maybe you've got some people, you know, and not like, you know, hardcore record collectors necessarily or anything like that, but like, you know, ask people around you, you'd be surprised. Like one of the cool things about being a teacher and working with students is I'm always getting music Rex from the youngsters. And they're always like, oh, you wouldn't like it. It's like, you have no idea what I would like, man. Like you just tell me where to find it and I'll go give it a look for myself. And I think that attitude about music and literature and art has been really useful to me as I've gotten older, because I actively try not to be like, well, I wouldn't like that. That doesn't sound like, I have no idea what it is. So like, let's go find out and try it. And, you know, like try to like approach it like a culinarian, you know, and just be really open to it. The space that I go to, like if I'm, and it'll kind of give you breakdowns by genres and playlists, and there's writing and reviews. But I love Bandcamp. I think Bandcamp is really excellent because you can go a lot more directly to, you can find a lot of artists in one space, like some other services that I won't talk about, but you can actually much more directly support record labels, recording artists, musicians. You can oftentimes you can hear the record, you know, before or once it's out, you can kind of give it a listen. If you want to buy it, download it, get a hard copy of it, whatever. There are places that use that as their store. So that's just one of those spaces that you can just kind of go poke around a little bit and catch a lot of good music um fast. For writing, there's a website called Large Hearted Boy. It's run by
And
a
I'll throw
writer
that in
named,
the
yeah, David Gutkowski. And it's writers talking about playlist, like making playlists for books that they've written, or like make, you know, sharing playlists that they were using while they were writing the books. And then vice versa, musicians talking about books that are important to them or that may be informative to their work and things like that. So it's just the whole thing is just this cross pollination, people talking about that. And so, you know, getting to hear what other writers are listening to and might be interested in like that's an excellent quick way to do that. The other thing is a little more physical, but I highly recommend it. If you have a good record store anywhere you live, please go support, just like local bookstore, local record store, like those are essential parts of the cultural communities in the towns and cities where they exist. And so please support them. Like where we live, we're fortunate. We've got Ragged Records, which is very dope. They have two locations in Rock Island and Davenport, which is double dope. And I know for a fact, because I know the excellent people who run and operate those spaces. If you go in there and you're like, hey man, you know, I love Weezer's Blue album or whatever, you know, whatever that thing, like I'm looking for something, you know, I want some new music, but I only listen to like these four records or like these three artists or something. Like, can you help me out? Like, you will leave there armed with a lot of recommendations, great suggestions.
I'll say
Um,
too,
new and old, right? Like through, it won't just be like the new flashy stuff. I mean, that's this all goes forward and backwards in time. There's great music that you haven't heard that happened before you were born, and there's great music that's hasn't happened yet that will be out sometime soon.
I know there's like a huge amount of stigma for folks who will volunteer that they don't listen to music. So I will say you can also, I can say about these spaces and about myself and about Ryan, that if you say, hey, I'm not really into music, but I want to try this thing, they're going to be delighted to introduce you to the love of their life. Like it's not,
Yeah,
no one's going to shame you, at
that's
least.
the great thing about, I mean, and it's not true, that it's not true of other kinds of bookstores, but like those independent bookstores, those independent record stores, like the people who work there, they got not like
Oh
they
man,
are they are the resource, right?
I get excited when people tell me they don't read. I'm like, let's talk about that.
Well, and even if it's like, okay, so if music isn't your thing or whatever, find your thing. That's what I would say. Like, hopefully there is a thing that helps you, you know, unload the weight of daily existence and, makes you feel more connected to yourself and to other people. And that's something that just, maybe helps you see at least a little bit the fuzzy edges of a larger picture. That's not you at the center of it, right? So if that's pickleball, if that's crocheting, like whatever the thing is, right? Like I don't, like I don't think of these things as hobbies because like these are things that I've done and been paid for, and like like I've done these at a high enough level that it's not really that, and they just mean too much to me. The only other thing that I do that's kind of like that is cooking, right? I cook a lot. I'm not like some great chef or anything, but I cook a lot and I feel better when I cook, and it's nourishing and it's creative, and it's also like an endless educational space, right? You're never gonna, so like all those things are sources of nourishment. So like whatever that thing is for you, find it, because I think whatever, hopefully I like to think that we all have something like that, whatever it is. Maybe it's not art. But if you don't feel like you have something like that, I hope sincerely that you are willing to try new things until you do, because I think that daily existence thing gets better when you have it.
And I was thinking earlier when we were talking about like trying new music, especially if I put myself in the mind of someone who just doesn't listen to music, like it's not a priority or whatever. I'm not good at trying new things. And I hope that I don't come off that way because I actively work on it. I don't think it's like a good lifestyle. Um, but I just want to say like that's that's okay. You can still try new things.
Oh yeah, I mean that's most people. I think that's most of it, and not just as it pertains to like books or music or movies or anything, but that's a huge um we like comfort. We are encouraged mightily by lots of forces, including in spaces like this one, to seek comfort, right? And like listening to new music or trying any new thing, I guess there's an amount of discomfort that comes with that, I suppose. But also like I don't know anyone who's ever been hurt by listening to a new band or a new song or a genre that they're not used to or something like that. Like it's zero casualties. So
Yeah.
you're going to be okay. I promise you, you're going to be all right. It might not be your bag, and that's fine, but like, there's a whole galaxy out there, and it's hard for me to believe that there's not, to be really cliche about it, something out there for everybody if you're willing to maybe poke around a little bit and participate in it. And that's what makes it all a community, and that's part of what makes it great beyond your own experience with it, is then meeting other people who like I can't tell you how many times I've like how many people I've met just like, oh, what book are you reading, or like, oh, what are you listening to? And it's like such a simple question, but like then all of a sudden you realize you like are both citizens in this very large, very colorful world, and you have so much to talk about, and that opens up everything else about your whole humanity, right? And so yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time. I can't get to my imaginative space where I can imagine being someone who doesn't listen to music, because it's just so. My
I
dad was a musician. Like I grew up around musicians. Like it's not. I can't.
I mean, I had historically found that kind of a shock and a turnoff if somebody had said that. But recently, not that recently, I had already loved someone when I learned that about them. And then tried to be a little more empathetic and understand. And I imagine I'm not a doctor. Don't follow me on this. I imagine it's got to be a sensory thing because there are plenty of things that like I can't look at that, because it's too
Yeah,
much.
there's a bunch of reasons. There's all kinds of stuff. It's not a character flaw.
No, it is not a character flaw.
It's not. I'm not shading anybody out here. Not no. I don't mean anybody any disrespect. And if
But
that
I
like that, but just like whatever it is, whatever your thing is, like hopefully there's a thing for you, and hopefully you found it, and it makes your life better. And if you haven't, um, it's probably out there waiting for you, and it will probably be happy that you find it too. Or there will be people there who are like, oh hey, here's a cool person that is now part of our thing, and that's I think always huge. So
yeah, I wanted to just include, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to be like, oh, music and writing, and they don't listen to music. They're not probably going to click on the link, right? But I did want to include them in the conversation because I think that when we say art is art, we want to include everyone.
yeah,
Um, I have not been keeping track of time, and I think that we are very close, if not past. Do
yeah,
you have any
that's
final
okay.
notes about where you would start? You're going to sit down today, and this is going to lead into our prompt, which I'll get to in a few minutes. You're going to sit down today and give yourself a little music space for your writing. What does that look like?
Like without any other, like you just want to write and you're not bringing anything else to the table. It's just you and the page, and like let's
Yep,
kind of get into that
you and the
space.
page and the speaker.
Well, I sent you a video that I am quite fond of for those purposes. So I would check that out, or I would check out something. Like with any kind of like free write thing, I think it's like the other good thing about using like a song or like an album or something, it's a set length of time. So like the video that I chose, it's a little bit longer. It's like a little over 20 minutes. It's a Tiny Desk concert. So it's those are all approximately of a similar length. Um, and so maybe that's a long time, but I feel like if you're gonna do for me like a music ekphrasis thing, the first thing I don't start doing immediately when the song starts and the clock is ticking, so to speak, is start writing. I spend like a few minutes. Like if I know it's gonna be, okay, this is like 20 minutes, I'm gonna take the first couple minutes to try to like get a feel for what I'm hearing and try to clear my mind and just try to be present with that music. And just that, it sounds a lot simpler, I think, than it is, but just like
I mean, it's hard for me
to
to
really
do
just
that, so I
turn,
like
yeah,
being told.
to try to like turn everything off and just focus on that page in front of you and just let that put you whatever space. And maybe it's a really happy space, maybe it's an uncertain space, maybe it kind of I cannot be in everybody's associative logic all at once. I do not have that power. But I know that everybody has one. I know everybody has that associative intelligence, and so knowing that, what you're hearing bring to your mind in terms of words, and then just go with that. And it might be weird and feel a little odd and maybe doesn't make sense, but after you do that, I bet when you go back and look at what you have, there will be some surprises. And I bet also too, that you'll want to go back and like it'll make you more curious about the music that you were listening to. Because if it's anything like what happens with me, you'll probably hit a point where the music sort of like it's 100% listening to music, and then the writing starts, and then the music kind of like is a little more backgroundish, right? Like it's still happening, but once I get going on something, I kind of that's where the focus starts to go. And so I can kind of like make that pivot. Uh, and it helps me do that. It helps me transition into a walking around doing stuff, working kind of space to a more creatively focused, attentive space. Which I
And
think
even
for any kind of creative work that you're doing, I think is usually helpful.
and maybe especially if it is hard for you to sit still, I'm talking about myself here. Um, doing your best to be, and this is my own personal experience, Ryan and I have done, can you define ekphrasis for us quick?
I mean, just real quickly, it's writing that is done in response to predominantly visual art. Like historically, it's been more paintings, sculpture, that sort of thing. But it could be film, it could be dance. Like the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa. I think they do this every year, where they do this collaboration between the dance department, and so they like do dance interpretations of some of the visiting fellows' work. And it's one of the coolest things that happens probably every year in Iowa City. It's so
Oh,
dope.
so good.
Ekphrasis. And so, yeah, so like listening to music and like
Stage, maybe?
historically, it was more like I'm describing this painting or I'm describing this urn. Over time, it's become more sort of like call and response, or sort of like participating in, or like maybe pulling an aspect of the work that you are experiencing out and then writing into that. So it can go a lot of different ways. So that's what we mean generally when we're talking about ekphrasis.
Oh, I forgot what I was going to say before that. Oh yeah, okay. So even and especially if you're somebody who has trouble sitting still, and like the idea of just doing the activity of listening to music, I have found, but this is anecdotal evidence, that just trying to get myself to focus on the music, not necessarily blocking anything out, really does just it does a ton to get me into a new space. So don't knock it till you try it.
Well, yeah, there's that, but I didn't say anything about sitting still necessarily either. Like you are listening to music, and so as the spirit moves one, like you were saying about your sister, like getting in these different positions
Mhm.
and whatever. Like if you feel like you need to move around or whatever,
I can't, yeah,
that might
I'm
sound like
bouncing
it's
right
clumsy.
now.
Like if you're at a computer or something like that, that maybe gets a little bit more difficult. But if you're running a notebook, if you're using your notes app, or if you were doing it via dictation. That I think dictation is interesting when you can kind of physically move around. Because the more you're physically moving around, the more you're stimulated, the more you're stimulated. And so those two things can be informative. And that's why part of why I think like a musical ekphrasis uh, prompt can be like really useful, because it's if the rhythm gets you, as Gloria Estefan said, um,
It's gonna.
then it gets you. Yeah, that it's probably gonna. And so if you need to move around, if you need to like get physical and do a little dancing or whatever, like whatever the thing is. But if you feel like, for me, it's much more just tempo keeping. Like I can't really listen to music and not keep time. I'm just a hand or a foot will be tapping, regardless. If I'm writing, probably feet, I guess. But like I'm always,
Oh yeah, no, I'm
I physically feel, I know when I'm kind of in that space, because my body's maybe paying more attention to what I'm hearing than my mind is. And that's a cool
that is,
place to be. That's a very cool place to be.
I'm
And it's
gonna,
free. You can be there too.
yes. I'm gonna let you go. I'm very, very grateful for your insights, and I think I'm gonna have some follow-ups, so maybe we can talk again next month.
I mean,
Uh,
I got Rex. So if you want Rex, I'll like, if you want to post them, I
yeah,
just want to shout out, I
definitely.
got a few things that I listen to that I think are
Yeah.
worth your time. Good people.
Um, yeah, yeah, definitely. So if you send me those, I'll get them up with the video. Then yeah, thank you, Ryan. I think we should follow up next month. And I'm gonna move on to updates from the Writing Center.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, this Saturday is the first Saturday of the month. So we have our first and third Saturday of every month. We um have a workshop group. We call it Writer's Studio. When I say workshop in this context, I mean this is a critique group. This is live. We do cold reads. It's from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. first and third Saturday of every month. We have an in-person group and an online group, same time. That is Central Time. So anyone is welcome. We ask you to, participate in each other's work. If you want to get feedback, you got to give feedback. But it's a really welcoming space. It's for anyone. Yep, and that's this Saturday, which is just a good time to try it. The time's always now. On Sunday, that's October 6th, we will be participating in Lowland Block Party. That's at the Labor Space in Rock Island, between Ragged Records and Raw's Talks. That's on 3rd Avenue in downtown Rock Island. There'll be live music all day, so keeping it on topic. And we'll also have readers every hour on the hour. We'll have some incredible writers show up and read their work to you. There'll be makers and sellers. It's like a little street fair, but not in the street. It's a really, really good time. This is, I don't know, I think the 6th one. Don't quote me on that. So I know it's a good time. I will be there. And I will be happy to be there. Next week on Tuesday the 8th, so that's going to be the second Tuesday of the month. This is worth noting because on the second and third Tuesdays of every month, we do a youth workshop group. This one will be online. Second Tuesday of the month is going to be the online group. That's from 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. Central for 15 to 19-year-olds. We will open with a free write, little writing exercise, get us sort of in a literary mood, and then move on to workshop, meeting critique. Coming up then on the 9th is the Spectra reading series. This, I've got it right here. This is going to be a really exciting one for me in particular, but especially for like anyone who's sort of aware of the Writing Center. One of our authors from the Susan K. Collins Mississippi Valley Chapbook Contest, who has never read in the Quad Cities before, will be headlining this show. Again, that's October 9th, next Wednesday. Doors are at 7 p.m. It's Elliot Sky Case, author of Get Home Safe. And they will be reading with Chuy Renteria, Kai Newell, and Lynn Kress. It's going to be a really, really, really great reading. I like before we had it planned, I like wanted to be talking about it all the time. So it's really, really exciting for me. Then on the 12th, Saturday, the 12th of October is our next workshop. It's from 10 a.m. to noon Central Time. It's on Zoom, so open to anybody who can hook up to that Wi-Fi. It's on the title of the workshop, and in this case, workshop means class. The title of the workshop is Writing from a Changing Place. Author Tamara Dean is going to be leading this workshop. It's open to writers of any genre and any level. We're going to work on, I say we, I'm going to be there. Leaning into place, which is something, all writers have to work with one way or another. And the emotionality of place and what it means when a place changes and how to work that into your writing. It's going to be really great. It's $40 for members, $60 for non-members of the Midwest Writing Center. Yeah, I'm excited about that one too. Then of course, the third Tuesday of the month, we've got our in-person youth workshop. Again, that's 5:30 to 8. That one's in person at the Midwest Writing Center. The 19th and 20th of October is Iowa City Book Fest, and you can find Ryan and I at the book fair. And the Midwest Writing Center will also be on one of the panels. We've got a lot more fun things going on with this web series, but that information has been posted everywhere, so you can find that on your own. I'll pick up with more events next time. We also have another Spectra reading series event on September 24th, but details on that will be coming out soon. So for today's October 24th, today's prompt for you, set yourself some time. If you need to limit your time, 5 or 10 minutes is what I would recommend for a free write. But like Ryan and I were talking about, we're going to use music this time. So I'm going to throw the link in the chat to the Tiny Desk concert that he mentioned. I'm going to mispronounce the musician's name. But it is a really good one. Ryan's Nubia Garcia. Thank you everyone for your patience here. It's really excellent, and I want to say, like, really any Ryan recommendations that you can get, you should. I have the good fortune to have access to his music a lot of the time, and it is always new and different, but not like too weird to listen to. So yeah, click the link, which will be in the video description, and write what comes. The advice he gave about sitting with it for a moment before you start writing is advice I would take. And as always, uh, thank you for joining us and write more light into your life.